I'm willing to take any type polygraph test because I know I'm telling the truth. I never raped or murdered anyone, period.
One thing that really stuck out in my mind is that his use of duct tape. Literally, he hung his curtains with duct tape.
He was very mobile, so we just knew that we were going to have a hard time in locating this individual. No one had seen him. No one had also reported him missing. They just assumed he was out of the area.
This is during July, and a lot of smoke was coming out of the chimney. Quite obviously that somebody was burning something. Cement blocks drew our attention because they appeared to be quite similar with the markings and type that we found on the body of Rachel Timmerman.
There was a pickup truck backed up to the garage door here, and they were loading stuff from within the household into the pickup truck.
That was very much a concern for us, that the family was assisting Marvin and just to dispose of evidence.
Those blocks that were found on Rachel Timmerman's body were a match to the blocks found at Marvin Gabrion's house. It was like a fingerprint.
It was described that he had gone to great extent to collect a number of pre-pubescent female pictures of girls wearing underwear and scanty clothes. And it wasn't commercial pornography, but it showed his preference for children.
PACER, otherwise known as Public Access to Court Electronic Records, is a fantastic resource for court documents because often they include items to support the claims they wish to argue in their briefs. I pulled all the documents related to the Rachel Timmerman case, and included with those I got everything from copies of the handwritten letters that Rachel was forced to write while she was being held by Gabrion, to his own rambling letters and excerpts from FBI statements, along with a thick file produced by the defense regarding the mental health of Marvin and his entire family, as well as a long family history. There were also letters from 2 medical examiners who had different takes on whether Rachel had been conscious and alive prior to being dumped into Oxford Lake. In all the documentation I just mentioned, I learned details about the case that did not generally get covered in the local media in detail, so there were many things that I hadn't really heard much about. The first seemingly important detail that I learned came from an FBI report, the statement of a woman who had been housed with Rachel Timmerman in the Newaygo County Jail during some of the time that she was beginning to serve her own 32-year sentence for marijuana trafficking. She spoke to the FBI 2 months after Rachel's body was found. In January of 1997, Rachel was doing that stint in the Newaygo County Jail for the probation violation revolving around pot, specifically for selling 1/8 of an ounce of pot to an undercover officer. When she went into jail, this woman was her cellmate. She said Rachel spoke to her in detail on many topics, some of which revolved around drugs. The woman alleged that Rachel had told her that she'd picked up pot on 2 different occasions from the same swampy lake area where she was later found dead. Rachel told her about going with a family member and another woman to pick up about 2 pounds of pot from a relative of Marvin Gabrion. According to this woman, Rachel was selling it for him, and the amounts discussed suggest that she was moving a fair amount per week. According to this woman, Rachel also shared with her details about Marvin Gabrion raping her, including who was present that night and details about Marvin offering her a ride home, including the fact that she'd mentioned the car had been a convertible. She said that Rachel told her that on the way home, Marvin passed her house and then stopped and told the other guys to get the fuck out of the car, which they did. This woman described the area where Rachel told her he had driven her, down the 2-track road, and once out of the vehicle how he had bit her and banged her head on the ground. She said he had repeatedly raped her, while telling her that he wasn't sure if he was going to let her go or kill her that night. She even knew about Rachel getting the hammer from the bathroom when she got home, and threatening Marvin with it when he entered the house. Rachel told this other inmate that after the rape, Marvin would continually stalk her and sit outside the Hardy Dam corner store waiting for her. This inmate was also aware of multiple threatening letters that Rachel received in jail from Marvin's family members. Because of these threats, Rachel had already approached corrections officers in the jail about Marvin Gabrion's status in the county system. She was telling multiple people even before she got out that she was afraid he would kill her and apparently that was based upon that literally being written in a letter as a threat to her. Later, among Rachel's belongings, multiple letters from Marvin Gabrion's mother, Elaine Gabrion, were found. Apparently, the letters mentioned Rachel's daughter Shannon frequently, in a way that appeared to imply a threat. In these letters, Elaine Gabrion gave detailed instructions about how Rachel should write a letter to the prosecutor to drop the charges against her son, Marvin. Elaine said, quote, "Sometimes my boys do bad things." The implication being that if Rachel didn't cooperate with her wishes, these bad things might somehow befall her. It's interesting that Rachel would eventually be forced by Marvin to do just that, write letters against her will, one of which went to the prosecutor, just as his mother had requested. So it appears as though multiple people in the Gabrion family had a vested interest in keeping Rachel quiet, and certainly not anywhere near a courtroom where she would possibly take the stand and reveal the full extent of their relationships. The other thing this suggests is that law enforcement officials were well aware of Rachel having been threatened by Gabrion before she was even released from jail, after the rape. She had told corrections officials, and she was receiving threatening letters, which I assume had been monitored since she was receiving them while in jail. I feel as though they all let this one slip through their fingers. Too many people knew this was a powder keg waiting to explode, because law enforcement was aware of the criminal history of Marvin Gabrion and his family. They were known to be selling drugs in the area, and had been for a long time. One of them was even in jail at the time on drug charges. I'm just going to say it. I think more than a few people failed Rachel Timmerman. I also think that there's probably more about Marvin's family's involvement in the death of Rachel Timmerman and the other missing men than we know, and certainly more than the police could prove. Marvin Gabrion also had a cellmate that got chatty with the feds. Gabrion told him all about this company called Loop Mantics Incorporated, where he had purchased books on survivalism, how to obtain false identities, and how to conceal dead bodies.
Hi, I'm Mike Hoy, president of Loop Mantics Unlimited, a small press publisher and bookseller. We specialize in such things as cheap living techniques, tax evasion, hard to find information on drugs. One of our best sellers is Rancho Costanada, the dirt cheap desert homestead, which tells how to go out in the desert and live for practically nothing by a guy who actually lives that way. I've been doing this for approximately 30 years, and the good Lord willing, I'll be doing it for another 30.
Gabrion told his cellmate that Rachel's grandmother had sold her baby because she needed the money. He said Gabrion kept a photograph of baby Shannon in his cell, and he once walked by and witnessed him doing something perverse while looking at the picture. Whenever Gabrion talked about the baby, his references to her were always in the past tense. While discussing the murder of an 18-year-old girl in Paw Paw, Michigan, whose boyfriend had murdered her and burned her vehicle, Gabrion told his cellmate that that's how he got rid of evidence. He said that he had a big barrel in the back of his truck that he used to burn evidence. Gabrion claimed to have lived and worked in numerous states, including Oklahoma, Seattle, Wisconsin, New York, Indiana, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and Arkansas, and he fancied himself God's gift to women. Said he liked younger girls. In a letter to one of his brothers dated October 25, 1996, from South Bend, Indiana, Marvin seems to confirm both that he was working out of state and his penchant for the ladies. During this time, by the way, he was running from law enforcement after being charged with Rachel's rape, which also seems to confirm that his family knew where he was while police were looking for him.
Just got a job, 12 hours a week, but it'll help. I have a new address. Could you give it to Mom when you see her? I got Yogi from Sherry, that helps. I missed him much more than her. She wants to date because we never did. Women can be so weird. Lots of rust-free cheap pickups down here. Mainly farmers buy new ones, no salt for snow. Cars go for a fair price. Looked at a 4-bedroom house yesterday for $12,000 in South Bend. Mishawaka is much nicer. Giant dealer swap meet here somewhere. John of John's Produce gets his stuff here. 70 degrees, 10 to 15 mile an hour winds, gorgeous blue sky. Some of these red-headed Irish co-eds can sure get me going. Too bad I'm not 20 years younger. They're fun to talk to anyway. Some of them are surprisingly mature. Don't forget to give Ma my address. This is my last envelope and she wanted to send me last year's birthday card. No waste, no want. Godspeed.
Yogi was his dog, by the way. What strikes me so much about that letter is how lucid and intelligent he sounds when compared to his rants at trial and the letters sent from jail. It seems to support the fact that he was absolutely in control of his faculties. The man was simply manipulative. While Gabrion claimed that he had nothing to do with the other missing men, Wayne Davis, John Weeks, and Robert Allen, his cellmate did recall him saying that he had tried to get Davis's birth certificate to use. One name Gabrion never mentioned to the cellmate was John Weeks, though he did claim to have killed a couple people. One he strangled, another he drowned. He indicated that the drowning had occurred close to the time he'd been arrested. Another thing the FBI report with his cellmate indicated was that Gabrion had shaved his entire body, head, arms, pubic hair, everything, when he learned that they might be coming to obtain hair samples. The result did nothing to make him appear less like a psychotic murderer. It was visually stunning. The report also appeared to suggest a breakdown between Marvin and his brother and his mother, who were supposed to be selling his vehicles and sending him the money. Marvin alleged that they had not. If you search his name today on the internet, you'll likely come across a creepy webpage where he rants about his lawyers, the judge, his brother, how the police framed him, and even requests letters from the ladies with a plea that reads,
I need full, complete, lengthy letters with or without photos. Help me relive the terrible emotional pain of my wrongful incarceration. Please allow me to live vicariously through your life's experiences, living, console, hopes, dreams, fantasies, and passions, whatever. Be yourself, no rules. Blue-eyed, 180 pounds, 6 feet tall, athletic, Libra, love for all, obviously humorous. Europeans, Canadians, Americans, all welcome. Limited Spanish, French, and fluent in English. Will try any language.
In preparation for the penalty phase of the trial of Marvin Gabrion for the murder of Rachel Timmerman, his defense team compiled a great deal of family history. What they ended up presenting was a fairly shocking social history, 152 pages that covered his life growing up in the Gabrion family, as well as the mental health history of his entire clan. While I'm not going into his siblings, nieces and nephews and other family members, most of their mental health histories were summarized, and one thing became glaringly clear right off the bat. This family had some pretty severe issues, above and beyond the fact that a majority of them had suffered from some type of diagnosed mental illness that ran the spectrum from general depression all the way up to suicide and/or psychotic schizophrenic episodes. If there was ever a document that could put to rest any idea that mental health has nothing to do with DNA, this would be that document. Their research stretched all the way through grandchildren of cousins twice removed, and the stain of mental health, substance abuse, and aberrant behaviors did not wane as the branches of the family tree continued to sprout. I was actually kind of sad after reading it. Not so much for Marvin, because I don't for a minute think his crimes had anything to do with his mental health, but for an entire lineage of human beings that, from their first breaths, were met with severe disadvantage. Some of these people suffered greatly and battled demons that most of us couldn't possibly imagine. I am going to outline a bit about his parents. I think how Marvin was raised is significant enough that it shaped who he and his siblings became. This report describes his life as being plagued by poverty, neglect, and trauma. There's also a lot of shame. As if to show with two images the exact point that Marvin Gabrion changed, the document begins with his 1971 high school graduation picture. The young man smiling back from the grainy black and white yearbook photo looks like he could have been best friends with Beaver Cleaver's older brother. His wavy hair is neatly combed and parted, and his necktie is properly knotted. Only the tiniest of things in that image suggests that something behind it might be slightly off. The corner of one lapel bent slightly up, as if to imply that were you to pan down to a full shot of him, the jacket might be rumpled, and the shirt beneath it would bear a few stains. Now cut to the second image, directly next to it, of a lean, wild-haired young man, shirtless in cut-off shorts, so uneven at the hem, the jaggedness reminds me of the attire of the Flintstones. The shorts look orange in the image, although the whole thing has an orange hue, so they might be closer to brown. The man with the long curly hair, almost a version of an afro, except for the already receding hairline, holds a styrofoam cup in one hand and a cigarette in the other, and he stands next to a car outside. His expression seems dire, confused, irritated. It's hard to tell, really, other than he doesn't seem amused. He's barefooted and he looks generally bedraggled, in stark comparison to the well-put-together yearbook photo. The report says that his behavior deteriorated soon after he graduated high school in 1971. Marvin was the fifth of 6 children born to Elaine and Marvin Gabrion Sr. He did acknowledge in one of his letters from jail many years later that he had been raped at age 9.5, although he says this in a letter addressed to "my wonderful daughter, Michelle Obama." In these later letters, he does sound deranged, although I'm not sure if the problem is that he wasn't being properly medicated while incarcerated, or he was playing it up during his appeals process. In this particular letter he says, quote,
I deserve a full pardon, regardless. If you want no contact with me and little publicity, Governor Granholm or Joseph Biden could handle it. I have enough proof of my innocence to push off media wolves. Michelle, you are severely, cruelly punishing me because 1. I was raped at age 9.5. 2. I'm white. And 3. I'm politically incorrect.
He signs off the letter by telling Michelle Obama that he loves her because she's his daughter and he needs to see her. In a final PS at the bottom of the page, he implores her to read the Constitution because any infringement on government or press pardon power is unconstitutional. The social history document goes into the molestation incident in more detail, suggesting that it was a neighbor that had lured Marvin and another child to his house using a ruse involving them helping him to rake some leaves. It does suggest that there was molestation involved, according to the family friend who had relayed the information. But how Marvin's mother handled the event is almost as disturbing as the event itself, apparently telling him that it was nothing and he shouldn't talk about it or even think about it. According to the report, she never even told their father that it happened. Marvin's mother, Elaine, is a compelling part of this story, and it's obvious that she had some pretty serious issues of her own. The report notes that, quote, the children learned that sex was a force that could disrupt lives, manipulate other people, and was often shameful and illicit. The children learned that they could not rely on their mother and that she might disappear without notice for unpredictable periods. Marvin's mother left her home and her children many times to be with men with whom she was having affairs. Marvin Sr. described how Elaine cheated frequently and left home for long periods of time. When she would return, he would take her back. Once, Elaine lived with her paramour for several years. During one of her long-term affairs, she left for a month and took only one of Marvin's siblings with her, abandoning the rest. According to the report, Marvin Sr. only believed 2 of the children were his biological children, believing the rest to have been fathered by other men. Marvin's parents, according to the report, would have physical fights after sex, violent bouts, usually when they were drunk, and either deliberately exposed their children to their violent sexual habits or were indifferent to it. The children were exposed to wide-ranging and often seemingly incongruent emotions. Despite having many affairs, Marvin's mother was said to have been very jealous. One story revolved around Marvin's father chatting with a pregnant woman at a wedding in 1960, and Elaine Gabrion became so upset, thinking there was something going on between them, that she punched the pregnant woman in the stomach. It seems from the many stories in the social history that Elaine did not maintain appropriate sexual boundaries with her children and their partners. Because of this, it appears that some of the children developed inappropriate sexual conduct as adults, including being physically and sexually abusive. And when you add addiction and drugs to the mix, you've got a hot mess of dangerous dysfunction. There seems to have been a fair amount of physical abuse between the father and the children as well, and also the boys with each other. They were obviously repeating the behavior of their parents, doing exactly what they had seen in their home over all those years. Getting your head beat against the wall seemed to be a regular occurrence in the Gabrion household, according to the report. Alcohol and drug use were prevalent in the Gabrion house. Elaine was even once arrested for smuggling pot into jail for another son in 1980. Even as she got older, she allegedly took over-the-counter stimulants. Multiple family members said she was an addict, and that the use and sale of drugs was a family affair. There was a fairly strong culture of criminality in the household, according to the report, as well as the numerous police reports and criminal records I've had the opportunity to review. Marvin Sr. stole a car when he was a juvenile and was sent to a boys' home. As an adult, he and a friend would steal televisions from homes and then sell them in Grand Rapids. When his friend was caught and arrested, Marvin Sr. gave money to his wife to help with her kids so that the friend wouldn't snitch on him. This is something that apparently his son Marvin had done with John Weeks before he ended up killing him. When Marvin was in jail, in order to try and get money for his son's defense, Marvin Sr. contacted an associate and asked him to put siding on only two sides of a tar paper house so he could take a picture and make it look more valuable than it was so he could get a mortgage based on a value for the home that far exceeded what it was worth. Marvin's mother was also well known for stealing things, and if her boys wanted something, she would do whatever she needed to do, even if it wasn't legal, to get them what they wanted. She was known to take her grandchildren into the store and have them steal things too. In 2000, she was banned from visiting one of her sons in jail because she was caught trying to sneak cash to him. These behaviors filtered down to her children, and some of them would be later arrested for the same behaviors. Surprisingly, as children, Marvin had the best reputation of the brothers, but something happened around the time he graduated high school. According to the report, Marvin was involved in an astonishing number of motor vehicle accidents and had obtained numerous head injuries, beginning around the time of his high school graduation. In fact, on graduation night in 1971, he was involved in a serious accident where he was injured while driving drunk. In the mid-70s, a girlfriend at the time reported that they had gotten into an accident where both of their heads hit the windshield and it broke. There was another car accident in 1974, and he also raced motorbikes in Arizona and got banged up a lot there. The same girlfriend, after they moved to Seattle, was involved in another vehicular accident with Gabrion. This time they were on a motorcycle and hit a car. Neither of them were wearing helmets, and he is said to have had a huge lump on his head after the accident. Marvin flew headfirst over the hood of the car and rammed into the door of a truck. There was yet another accident in 1976. This time the other vehicle operator's fault, but Marvin was plowed into on the driver's side as he pulled into a gas station. In August of 1983, Marvin was evaluated at Gerber Memorial Hospital after being found with a strong odor of alcohol on his breath, staggering and slurring his words, trying to tow a damaged vehicle from an accident scene. And this wouldn't be the first time he would be found trying to move a vehicle from a crash scene that he'd created. That happened again in 1985. Marvin did a lot of drunk driving. There are 2 more vehicle accidents described, one where he smashed into a chain-link fence after spinning donuts in his car and went through the windshield head first. Another where he ran his motorcycle into a telephone pole. In March of 1992, he got into another car accident in Cedar Springs and was taken to Butterworth Hospital in Grand Rapids. There he experienced coordination and memory problems, slurred speech, pain in his neck, and tingling in his elbow and fingers. 5 months later, in August, he was still having periods of memory loss and was then referred for an evaluation for post-traumatic head syndrome. The doctor also noted some depression, and Marvin was even sent for an Alzheimer's screening psychiatric evaluation. At that time, he told the doctors, quote,
My head feels like it's underwater, foggy, fuzzy. Everything is kind of difficult and out of focus.
At this time, in the report, he is noted as having problems with daily tasks. Quote, he does not currently drive, and he goes to his mother's for many meals rather than cooking. His brother does the house cleaning, laundry, shopping, household repairs, maintenance, and yard work, rather than Marvin. His brother noted that Marvin almost burned the house down because he left the stove on. Marvin could not manage money well. He admitted that he could not think as quickly as before. Now remember, all of this is reportedly occurring in the years before Rachel Timmerman was found in July of 1997. Further down the report, he's still complaining of dizziness, headaches, fainting spells, poor concentration, nightmares, impatience, irritability, and he described a feeling as if his frontal lobes were underwater. He said,
It feels like there's a worm crawling on my right temple.
There were also indications of seizure activity, so Marvin was put on a medication that's often prescribed for bipolar disorder. Years later, in prison, he would also be prescribed an anti-seizure medication. In 1993, he had a neuropsychological evaluation that made these conclusions. He had severe challenges regarding attention, stream of awareness, concentration, and investment in sustained ideational activity, which comprises basic functional abilities. They noted memory impairments associated with attention-related problems and said that his problem-solving challenges were in the moderate to severely impaired range because he was unable to sustain continued cognitive effort. This report noted that he was highly distractible through testing and unable to complete them in a reasonable frame of time. He was noted to be verbally excessive and hard to redirect. Retrieval from memory was reduced and he was verbally verbose. Pragmatic problems were severe with a tangential style and social awkwardness which call into question his capacity to function within a treatment milieu. Marvin's span of effort for purposeful activity related to self-care seems less than 30 seconds. His initiation is strong, but it results in a chaotic, multifaceted approach to problem-solving, resulting in significant confusion for more complex tasks requiring planning and social judgment. They also noted that he was not consistent with medication management and would have required supervision for a medication routine. His ability to budget was poor, he had poor functional math skills, and significant confusion as well as impulsivity. To me, the above describes him well, as we know him around the time of Rachel's murder and thereafter. His verbal style is definitely verbose, and his scrawled letters are the same. Social awkwardness tracks with how many folks described him as strange and a bit of a mess. And the chaotic, multifaceted approach to problem-solving fits really well with how intricately he planned those murders and everything around them, including changing his identity multiple times, going so far as having Rachel write letters before she died, and later mailing them in another state where he then sold a stolen car. To me, his problem-solving approach is manic and all over the place. At this point in the evaluation, his doctor recommended medications, but it required that he find a stable place to live, so he was discharged to his brother, and I am sure you can guess how well that went. No one would hold out much hope that this would work out. Upon discharge, he was given numbers for multiple support resources, including a referral to Newaygo County Mental Health, and also numbers for various homeless shelters, should he refuse the recommendation. After that, he was homeless quite a bit, including living on a roof and in a shed in Grand Rapids. Even at some of the missions and shelters, he was made to leave due to aggressive behavior. He didn't take his medication properly, and he lost his Medicaid because he improperly submitted forms. It doesn't appear that Marvin was interacting with people well at this point. One family member said, almost without fail, his interactions would escalate, and he would upset those around him. Later that year, he was admitted to St. Mary's in Grand Rapids with a head injury, after a carjacking incident where he was assaulted with an unknown object. Within the next couple years, he would cross paths with Robert Allen, the man whose identity he stole and has never been found. The reason I covered Marvin's mental health is not because I believe it had any bearing on him being found guilty of murder. I think he plotted and planned in a way that leaves no doubt that he was fully aware of what he was doing, and he knew it was wrong, and none of that can be blamed on his mental illness. But I don't think there is any question that Marvin Gabrion was shaped by everything he experienced. It does seem clear that he could have had some of these same types of brain injuries that we see in football players. Look at what happened to Aaron Hernandez. There are some glaring similarities in their stories. Now that I've gotten you up to speed on where Marvin Gabrion was mentally at the time, I'll go over what I know about Robert Allen and Wayne Davis. Both men would have suffered at Marvin's hand after the events I outlined here. This person that I've described is the person who ended both of their lives, as well as Rachel, her baby, and John Weeks. They all had a final encounter with a man who could barely move around socially without causing a problem. Yet this same man was able to, albeit in a very manic way, execute all their murders so efficiently that most of them have never been found.
All right, we just reached Twinwood Lake. You see down there, Mom, all the way at the south end of the lake, you see where that little...
Where the sun is shining?
Right, exactly. Where the sun is shining, that's where the creek opens up into the lake.
Want to get a picture of that?
Yeah, I will. I'll get a picture of that. And so the cabin that Marvin Gabrion lived on was directly straight ahead, somewhere in those woods. When he disposed of Wayne Davis's body, this lake was frozen over. It was February.
Oh, my.
Yes. So he would have...
How did he get it in the lake?
Here's the thing. This would have been frozen. He walked probably right across the lake. Yes. Can you believe that shit? So his cabin would have been way down there near the south end a little bit or halfway, and it's up on a hill. So if you can see those, you can't see past the trees, but those houses are on a hill a little bit. He would have walked down the hill. There's a boathouse down there behind that house.
I can see the boathouse there almost. Yep. The sun is not in our favor today.
Yeah. But that would be exactly where it is. He would have walked from the cabin across the ice, across over there. And that's how he did it.
Amazing.
Yeah, it is. It's a pretty lake. It's supposed to be really good for fishing. So now let's see if we can find our way out of here. Because to get back here, it's very remote. Okay, so we're in. Lock everything up in case we encounter anyone on the way. There was a guy that was drinking. Was he walking with a beer down the road when we passed him? I don't know. This would not be an area I would want to be in remotely and alone. This is
About my 38.
Yes, because
I left at home.
Yeah, it's very remote. Very remote.
Now, how do we get out of here?
I think you just follow it, right?
I'm not sure, but we'll find out.
We passed the
We did this. Nothing like trying to figure out how to get out. Okay, so the thing I'm thinking of right now is if another car comes this way, we're trapped.
Yeah.
Because we can't go through the trees to get the hell out of here.
Yeah.
Let's more pace a little.
Well, not too much. The tree is beautiful. The color is beautiful back here right now.
But you could be trapped
in November, beginning of November. Yes, you could be trapped back here. This is deliverance country is what it is.
Well, the
it's
thing
scary.
is the road isn't very wide and the trees are kind of tight-knit. So if like I said, if another car was coming this way, it would force us to stop and we would have no way to turn about.
Yeah,
which is very scary.
There are sort of like makeshift pullovers in a couple areas, but...
Can you tell? My watch is saying to me, breathing time.
Her Apple Watch is telling her to calm down. You need to take a few breaths. Well, okay, that's true.
Gotta love that.
I like it that I rope you into all these things and you're okay with going.
According to the autopsy report, Wayne Davis was last seen on or about February 13th, 1997. On July 4th, 2002, almost 5 years to the day that Rachel Timmerman was found in Oxford Lake, Wayne's body was found floating in Twinwood Lake by someone who reported it after the guy that I spoke to, who alleged that he had found it first. We know Marvin Gabrion had a penchant for duct tape, and the same telltale tape was found around Wayne Davis's mouth. Unlike Rachel Timmerman, though, it also covered his nose. The report notes that he likely died from asphyxia. There were remnants of duct tape found around one of his boots suggesting that his feet had also been bound. And remnants of chain were rusted to the clothing on his body. In this case, though, there were no blocks attached. It appeared that the chains may have broken, which would be consistent with someone having snagged the body and pulled it to the surface. Based on the multiple layers of clothing on the body when it was found, it appears that Wayne was either outside when he encountered Gabrion or was at least dressed for an outside activity. So did Marvin go out and grab Davis up somehow, incapacitate him, bind him up, and then drag him across the frozen Twinwood Lake? Or did Wayne end up at Gabrion's cabin for some reason and that's where it was done? The friend of Wayne's who had gone to his house the day before she was to drive him to jail to start serving his DUI charge had found Marvin Gabrion there working on a car. Did Marvin somehow get to him there and then later transport his body to Twinwood Lake? We may never know. But my source believes that he and a friend may have been at the cabin one night when Wayne was inside, and based on the time frame, it very well could have been a night around the time that Wayne Davis was killed.
Me and Keith showed up. We were on our way to Wisconsin. So we showed up out to the cabin. And like I said, I was always a little leery of them guys. So I stayed in the car, stayed back for a minute. Then I got out of the car and started to walk up there. He came out of the house. His face was white as sheet. We went back to the car, and he's like, I didn't shut the door till we exited the driveway because I didn't want him to know I was even there because they were smoking crack and getting crazy. It was, I think three of them maybe was in there. I don't know. Nothing was ever mentioned, but I can't see him doing anything crazy without around. And I never knew that. I left shortly after that. I mean, we did our little trip, our little run to Milwaukee, and then back over to White Cloud. And then I left the state and didn't look back. Because Marv was getting crazy and he was going to kill somebody.
So you literally left the state because of how things were getting around here?
Well, no, there was some other things. I got into some pretty deep trouble, and I was forced out. Police actually forced me out. And I went to trade school, and so I went professional while these guys all stayed behind and became what they became. Actually, I don't know why went over there. He probably went over to get some pie. Pulled in there, got out. He was in there for a while, and I got out, started walking in there, came out all white in the face. And said he's like, he's going crazy in there. He's going to kill somebody. And got in the car, and I remember I wouldn't shut the door until we hit Basswood.
Because you didn't want him to hear it?
Yeah, I didn't want him to hear two doors. I didn't want him to know I was there.
So you were that uncomfortable with him at that time?
I was that uncomfortable with Marvin my whole life.
But you don't know who else was in the house or what who he was referring to wanting to kill or anything?
I was under the impression it was Davis. He wouldn't tell me nowadays if I talk to him because I'm an outsider. I'm not an insider no more.
What gave you the impression it was Davis?
Saying that, he said that name.
Said the name?
Yeah. But you gotta understand too, there's, I think, 3 branches of Davises in that town. So, I don't think they're related, actually.
So what exactly did he say about Davis?
He just said he's gonna kill him. And he's nuts. He's going nuts. They're smoking crack. They're getting all crazy.
So, as far as you knew, there was someone named Davis, and you weren't sure which Davis, in the cabin at that time with him?
Yeah. He was there.
Okay.
Marvin, I think they're in that guy.
But at that night that you went to the cabin, they were all there inside with someone named Davis?
Yeah.
Okay. And so when came out, he just looked freaked out. And is there anything specific he said
as far as, but other than Davis being in there, what was going on in there that made him upset?
No, just as they were smoking crack and getting totally crazy. Marv was nuts, so enough without smoking cocaine.
I don't know as much about Robert Allen, and that's likely because he was essentially homeless, and his going missing had gone undetected for some time. The Michigan State Police report that I have says it was not initiated until details about Gabrion's homicide investigation were learned, and this was some 2 years after Allen had not been seen in the soup kitchens and other places that he frequented in Grand Rapids, which Marvin spent a lot of time in. I tracked a lot of stuff down. That's where he met Robert Allen. That's where he rented a room at some point. He was sleeping on a roof at one point on Division, and he was in a shed at one point. He was staying at a hotel. I just got a police report yesterday where he was staying in a hotel over, where was it? Montague, I think. And he had stayed for a week in this hotel, and it's over in the boonies by a lake. And they had asked him to leave because he was acting strange. And the maid went to the room later to see if he had left, and he took all the bedding. He took the pillow and the blankets and the washcloths, and he took a fan. Stole a bunch of shit. And then I'm thinking, why did he take the bedding? Was he had like $1,000 on him at the time. So did he take the bedding because there was like blood on it and he did something on it? Or did he just take it because he was being an asshole? You know,
It was in the latter.
The asshole?
Yeah.
At first I thought, well, maybe he took it because he knew he was going to be sleeping outside. And, but then I thought, well, he had over $1,000 in his wallet at the time. So he could have gone somewhere else. But this was like a little side of the road, shitty motel, one of those strip ones that just like 7 or 8 rooms, and I can't understand if he was moving around because he was hiding out from the cops always from the last thing he did, or what the deal was.
He's probably, sounds like you're smoking crack, 'cause that's how you act when you smoke crack.
Oh, and they found a bunch of pills on the floor. He left like a bunch of pills on the floor. Did you know him to be a pill popper?
Oh, yeah. They would do anything to get high.
Marvin selling that Chrysler New Yorker to the man in Fort Wayne, Indiana, under the name of Robert Allen, is where this report begins, with a note that says when they checked with the Indiana Bureau of Motor Vehicles, they learned that someone named Robert Allen had applied for a learner's permit in that state on February 25, 1995. 5 months later, he applied and received an operator's license. By the time family was contacted, none of them had heard from Allen for 4 or 5 years. The report notes that Mr. Allen was born in Hopkins, Michigan, and both of his biological parents were deceased. He'd been married from 1984 to 1990, and Mr. Allen was known to have hitchhiked all over the United States, but he did not have a strong family connection. He was described as a loner type, and had spent some time in a mental health facility in Kent County, Michigan. He had also had numerous contacts with police over the years. A clinical supervisor at St. Mary's Heartside Clinic identified a photo when it was shown to her, and she believed that she had last seen Mr. Allen in May of 1995. She remembered him because he was a frequent visitor of the clinic. In 1991, he had an arrest for criminal sexual conduct, 2nd degree, and was on probation when he went missing. His probation officer last saw him on May 9, 1995, when he was discharged from probation. Mr. Allen received Social Security disability benefits for a mental health disorder and had no driver's license or vehicle. His only means of transport was public, and he was known to visit the homeless shelters in Grand Rapids. Marvin Gabrion was known to frequent some of these same places. Once he was arrested, it took the FBI and multiple law enforcement entities across the country quite a while to unravel the tangled web of deception that Marvin had woven over many state lines. In the end, he stole multiple identities, obtained driver's licenses in many different names, and bought and sold cars and other items all across the country. Because he had around $1,800 in $100 bills on him when he was taken into custody, police also thought that he may have been selling drugs across state lines with the help of other family members. FBI reports from the court filings have documented calls by family members to known drug associates in Kentucky, where Marvin had apparently obtained a temporary car tag and a license plate. He had a Virginia temporary tag on the car that he was driving when he was arrested, under a name that he had stolen from the man I told you about in an earlier episode, the man who had interviewed with Gabrion for a job that he had found listed in the newspaper. Marvin was a busy guy while he was on the run, moving from con to con, and all the while he was keeping in touch with his family. Once police had him in custody and it was clear that he wasn't getting out, his con changed to manipulation. Manipulating Rachel's family, the police, and jailers. Meanwhile, his case moved through the court system. He was tried, and after that, he filed many appeals. For family and friends of the victims, it must have been torture to keep seeing his name pop up in the news clips year after year, as Gabrion fought his death penalty conviction with every crazy breath he had in him. Of course, this was to be expected given how he acted during the trial. The judge had to eventually deny him the right to fire his lawyers and defend himself due to his constant erratic behavior and frequent court disruptions. At one point, he punched his own defense attorney in the face right in front of the jury. He committed dozens of major violations while he was housed in the Calhoun County Jail and filed repeated bizarre motions full of obscene language and weird accusations. He called his lawyer and the judge Satan and Hitler. While incarcerated, Marvin hasn't exactly been a model inmate. The following is a recreation from a transcript of him making a call while pretending to be a federal court employee to try and get himself moved.
For English, press 1. Español, dos. Please enter your PIN. You have $20. Please enter the number you wish to call. You have 40 minutes.
You have reached the Federal Correction Institution in Milan, Michigan. If your call is in reference to an inmate, press 1, now. If your call is not in reference to an inmate, and you know the 3-digit extension number of the person you are trying to reach, dial it now. I'm sorry, I did not hear your selection. Please re-enter your selection now. If you're calling from a touch-tone phone, you may enter the extension at any time. If you don't know the extension, press 411 for a directory. Otherwise, please stay on the line and an operator will be right with you. This call is subject to monitoring and recording.
Milan, inmates.
Yeah, I'm trying to, talk to the warden's office.
You called the unit for inmates.
This is the federal court.
FCI Milan, speaking. Can I help you?
I'm trying to reach the warden's office.
Is this a call in reference to an inmate?
This is Ron Weston of the federal court.
I'm sorry, what's that?
Ron Weston of the federal court in Western District, Grand Rapids, Michigan.
Uh-huh.
I need to talk to the warden's office.
The warden's office?
Yes.
Is this in reference to an inmate?
It's in reference to moving an inmate.
The warden's not here today. Can I direct you...
Can you take a message?
Can I direct you to the ISM department?
Who?
The supervisor of the ISM department.
ISM, what does that mean?
Systems, they're the movement people.
Oh, they move inmates like from jail to, okay.
Okay, hang on a second, all right? Records, this is Laura. Can I help you?
Yes, this is Ron Weston of the federal court in Grand Rapids, Michigan.
Okay.
And we're trying to find out whether or not you have a problem with having a certain inmate who has been at your facility before. He's a federal inmate, placed back at your facility before the judge enters an order.
Gabrion?
Yeah.
I tell you what, I don't make these final decisions. Can I,
Can you take down Judge Bell's fax number and figure it out? Just put something into fax, send it to him, whether he can or can't be there, because he doesn't want to put a court order in the FTC unless you want him there.
Okay.
Okay, it's 616-456-2538, and it's Judge Bell.
Judge Bell?
Robert Holmes Bell. Right.
And is that for permanent custody or temporary custody?
Temporary at the FTC or the unit that you want.
Temporary custody until designated at a further facility?
Just holding for the court.
Okay, is that his phone number of the fax?
That's his fax number.
Can I have his, your number?
456.
Hold on. 456.
2021. He wanted you to just fax something on paper to him. Take it to him before he enters the court order.
Okay, let me go talk to my warden and I'll get right back to you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, have a good day. In the end, Marvin Gabrion was found guilty. And what followed were years and years of appeals, the most significant of which being his efforts to appeal the death sentence. His attorneys asserted that he was unable to assist them until they could restore his competency with medication. They pointed to his bizarre behavior before and during the trial, noting, quote, "His peculiar conduct has continued unabated in the 15 years since he was sentenced to death. His mentally ill conduct did not begin with the events described at trial. Mr. Gabrion behaved erratically for decades prior to Ms. Timmerman's death." The appellate attorneys argued that the trial attorneys did not insist on a hearing to test the conclusions of the government witnesses, which had concluded that he was competent and malingering, even though some bizarre behavior was noted. Essentially, they believed that he was faking a lot of his symptoms, at least during the time of the trial.
Michigan's Constitution does not allow the death penalty, but the site of Oxford Lake where her body surfaced is in the Manistee National Forest, making it a federal crime.
The Court of Appeals today ruled the jury should have been allowed to consider the fact that Michigan does not allow the death penalty when deciding if Gabrion should be sentenced to death or life in prison.
Why don't they just do it and be done with it?
Do what?
Put him to death. I'll go down and watch.
Relatives of Gabrion's victims were baffled by today's U.S. Appeals Court ruling to toss out the death penalty over a mistake in court.
I was afraid it was going to be for him punching his lawyer. I thought that's why he was going to get off. Not because of Judge Bell making a mistake. I would have never guessed that.
The appeals court ruled the local federal judge should have allowed defense attorneys to tell the jury that Gabrion could not have gotten the death penalty if it were a state case.
And what about the look in his eye? I'm sure you've seen it, right?
Yes. He tried that on me, and I just looked right back at him. And then I said on the record should reflect Mr. Gabrion is staring at me and has stared at me for the last 2 hours, and it's having no effect whatever upon me.
Relatives of his victims are certain that Gabrion is gloating in prison.
He is evil. I kind of like the idea that he was sitting there knowing someone was planning his death so he could feel a little bit of what he put Rachel through.
It seems to me that they're overthinking it, doesn't it? Aren't they overthinking it? The jury decided. The jury is the only one that's capable of giving the death penalty. It wasn't the judge. It wasn't an appeals court judge. It was the jury.
There were two very specific reasons why the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals decided to give Marvin Gabrion a new sentencing phase of his trial.
We knew what Marvin had said. We knew what Marvin had done. The attorneys did a phenomenal job through the penalty phase to get us to where we were able to make the decision we made.
One of the reasons Gabrion will get a new sentencing phase is because the judge ruled Gabrion's attorneys could not stress to the jury that Michigan does not have the death penalty. If Rachel Timmerman's body had been found less than 250 feet away, Gabrion would have been tried in a state court and never would have faced the death penalty.
We all knew that there was not a death penalty in Michigan, and had there been, it had been years and years that anything had done like that.
The other concern was that the judge didn't specifically stress to the jury that they had to be sure beyond a reasonable doubt that Gabrion deserved death.
I knew when I left that courtroom it was the hardest thing I had ever done to sign my name to that line, to have somebody put to death.
And as far as the new sentencing phase he's going to get with the new jury,
I don't know how they'll do just the sentencing phase. I would think that would be very hard for a jury to come in and only hear those few days of testimony that we heard after we'd already made our decision based on the penalty phase. I wouldn't want to be that jury to have to make that decision.
The appeals court ruling made it very clear that his guilt is not in doubt at all. Now, the next step in this case will be to see if the U.S. Attorney's Office decides to pursue the death penalty again against Gabrion, and then a new jury will decide his new fate.
Higher courts overturned the death penalty, then reinstated it.
Do you expect him ever to be put to death with the way the system is right now?
I wouldn't give it better than a 50-50 chance. I think it's more likely he'll spend the rest of his life in prison.
I believe Mr. Gabrion should be put to death because of what he did to my daughter, Rachel. He put her in handcuffs and chains. He chained cement blocks to her. He wrapped her entire head with duct tape. He put her on a boat and drug her out into the middle of Oxford Lake. And then he threw her in. If that doesn't deserve the death penalty, what does?
Michigan doesn't have the death penalty, but the area of Oxford Lake, where Rachel Timmerman was found, was technically on federal land, inside the Manistee National Forest. That's why he sits on death row today. But this was a bit of a gamble for the prosecutors, because in order for the jury to find Gabrion guilty, they would have to prove Rachel died on federal land, meaning that she drowned and was not dead when she went into the water. If she was killed elsewhere and dumped into Oxford Lake, the death penalty would then not apply. Although they were ultimately successful, there were differing opinions by experts in their field as to whether Rachel did actually drown. The thing with drowning is that it's what Dr. Stephen Cole, forensic pathologist, called in his book an autopsy of exclusion, meaning one where you first must exclude all other possibilities. On the stand, Dr. Cole could not state with certainty that Rachel was not strangled or suffocated on state property and then dumped into the lake on the federal side, but he said that drowning was the most likely cause. The prosecution only had to point to a couple things to bolster that notion for the jury. You don't have to bind and tape the mouth of someone who is already dead. You could just toss them in the lake. Dr. Cole also noted that he found no evidence of strangulation, no petechial hemorrhages, and no fractured neck bones, things that you would generally expect to find in the case of a manual strangulation. He did, however, concede that it would be possible to place a towel around Rachel's neck, choke her with that, and that would avoid creating the aforementioned signs of strangulation. Gabrion's defense attorney, Paul Mitchell, pointed out that if she drowned, wouldn't you expect to see mud in her lungs and her throat and her nasal passages from the mucky water? Daniel Spitz, the son of world-renowned medical examiner Dr. Werner Spitz, was hired by the prosecution to review the materials associated with the death of Rachel Timmerman, as well as the testimony and autopsy report of Dr. Stephen Cole. While he did agree that her death was homicide, he wrote, quote, "It is my opinion that there is nothing in the available forensic evidence upon which a competent forensic pathologist could conclude that Ms. Timmerman died as the result of drowning." He further noted, quote, "Dr. Cole's testimony at Mr. Gabrion's trial was that Rachel Timmerman's likely cause of death was drowning. That is not Dr. Cole's conclusion in the autopsy report. At trial, he did not testify as to any new facts or additional information that would have caused him to change his opinion. The only information upon which Dr. Cole could have based the opinion that he expressed at Mr. Gabrion's trial appears to have come from a hypothetical question asked by the government, which assumed that Ms. Timmerman was seen alive and unbound on the shore of Oxford Lake." Well, yeah, that's kind of an important point. Multiple witnesses did see her there alive, and when you couple that with the timeline and the tape and the handcuffs and the blocks, what you have is a very educated autopsy of conclusion that suggests she wasn't strangled elsewhere and then dumped in the lake. She was most likely alive when she reached the lake. So to me, Dr. Cole's conclusions were strong, and it looks like the jury agreed. I actually came by Rachel Timmerman's case and the cases of the other missing men attributed to Marvin Gabrion when I posted on a Facebook page about covering the case of Rick Atwood, who will be the subject of next season's case. It's turning out to be a little harder to get people to talk to me on that one, certainly on the record, but I've done a few interviews now, and my original source was able to speak a little to both cases, which is why I decided to post the Timmerman case first. Did Rick hang out with Marvin generally, or was it just an in-passing type deal?
Oh, they hung out from time, and we all did. We were all at the same parties.
I don't understand. Marvin was a troublemaker. He was he would have been known to local cops for sure, right? I mean, they had his number even then.
He was a mess up.
And these cases have a few things in common. First, the location. You may have noticed that most of my cases take place in the same geographical area. Newaygo County was described beautifully in The Color of Night by the Timmermans. It is a bit of a fearful land. All you have to do is ask the locals. They'll tell you that they have more than their fair share of tragic deaths and missing people to contend with. Both cases involve drugs, and some of the same local actors are mentioned in both case files, including the Gabrions as well as some same informants on the case. This makes sense. When something bad happens in a small community, if someone gets robbed or goes missing, police pay a visit to these local actors and informants to either see what they know or see what they might have done. My source knew the Gabrions well because he also sold drugs and ran in the same circles, and he also knew Rick Atwood. He was one of the first people to contact me about Rick's case, and many of the details that he mentioned ended up bearing out when I got the police report. One of the people who came to me early on about Rick's case told me that he thought one or more of the Gabrions may have been involved with Rick's death. And then I learned that Rick moved in the same circles as the Gabrions, and they both sold drugs. I also got the name of someone who had allegedly told my source that he was told by one of the Gabrions that they were involved in Rick going missing, at least as far as body disposal.
So, was telling me that Ricky got into some trouble with the black mob out of Chicago, and he owed a few $1,000s. And Marv took care of it. And the pig pen that used to be behind the house was where the body was disposed of with the pig.
That name, interestingly, also appeared in a witness statement regarding Rachel Timmerman's case. 17 days after Rachel's body was found, this same witness is talking to police about Wayne Davis's disappearance. He emphatically stated that he believed Marvin Gabrion killed Wayne Davis to prevent him from testifying in Rachel's rape trial. He described Marvin as having always been abnormal and believed that he had killed before. While he would not give them any names, this is someone who told my source that Marvin may have been involved in Rick's disappearance. At the time, he only told police that he based his feelings about Marvin having killed before on his behavior, and that he was always burying something and he was always hiring people to dig holes. So this very witness was someone that I was initially told that I should contact about Rick's disappearance, because of what he'd told my source that he had been told by the Gabrions. But hearsay is a hell of a thing. There's a lot of backtracking and unraveling and trying to locate sources of something said which, in the end, they may or may not even cop to. Now, you remember that witness who had run into Marvin Gabrion at the convenience store after Rachel was murdered, and he mentioned that he had just got rid of his girlfriend? To which Marvin replied that he'd just gotten rid of his girlfriend too, by chaining her up with cement blocks and tossing her into a lake? Well, that witness showed up in the Rick Atwood police report too. He alleges that he was the last person to see Rick alive before he left to Grand Rapids to pick up some dope, according to him. In his interview, the Gabrion's name came up at least once also. I hope to unwind all of that next season and maybe get some answers about what really happened to Rick Atwood. Because from what I'm seeing so far, this case doesn't have anything to do with the Gabrions. Although I guess it's not surprising that people would think that someone that could get rid of bodies so easily might be responsible for all of the missing people in the area. But it looks like this case is going in an entirely different direction. Now, please spare a thought for Rachel, Baby Shannon, Wayne Davis, Robert Allen, and John Weeks. See you next season.